first start off. Thank you, Cheyenne. Cheyenne is my technical person because y'all know I'm old and I don't know how to do things. But we're going to start off with two short videos. The first one is about suicide prevention because, of course, September is Suicide Prevention Month. It doesn't necessarily have to do with open carry, but I did want to recognize that because it is Suicide Prevention Month. And the second one is our Sheriff Mina's take on open carry.
In 2020, the proportion of youth suicides that involved a gun surpassed those by other methods.
I'm not surprised by that statistic. We know that access to firearms makes suicide much more likely and much more deadly.
This is an epidemic that's going on.
It's not because I think that suicide would be non-existent without firearms. It's because I think that suicide by firearm is so much more lethal.
It makes me just wonder why we don't have stricter gun laws.
For those people who are saying that guns have nothing to do with it, I mean, how many bodies have to be in the ground for them to think that it's a problem?
Do you know Elizabeth is with the veterans and she introduced herself. She has been so wonderful working with suicide with the veterans and also supporting us with gun locks. So thank you, Elizabeth, for the work that you do.
I'm Orange County Sheriff John Mina. The First District Court of Appeal has ruled that Florida's ban on open carry of firearms is not valid. I want to make sure that our Orange County residents and visitors understand their rights and responsibilities. Although firearms can now be carried openly in Florida, you cannot carry openly or concealed in most government buildings, on college campuses, or passenger terminals at airports. It's very important that you understand the law. And it's important to understand that private property owners can still prohibit anyone from carrying firearms onto their properties and trespass anyone who violates that rule. That includes any private residence or business or places like shopping malls, hotels, and theme parks. The Orange County Sheriff's Office is committed to protecting the rights of all of our residents and visitors. If you own firearms, please read more about the law through the link in this post.
Okay, Carla, Senator Smith. We will hand it over to you. We need to understand why this happened and go for it.
Sure. Well, thanks again for having me, Linda. It's good to see everyone. For those who don't know, I'm Carlos Guillermo Smith. I'm a state senator. I represent Florida Senate District 17. That's most of Orange County east of I-4. Most of you remember me from my time in the Florida House as well, where we prioritized gun violence prevention, certainly in the wake of Pulse and also Parkland and so many other terrible tragedies that we've seen. Well, first, of course, we disagree with and are extremely frustrated with the first DCA Court of Appeals decision, effectively invalidating open carry. We are in a bit of a unique scenario in that we have an attorney general that is not doing their job as it relates to defending the laws of Florida. That law includes open carry, and up until this moment, we have been, I don't want to say fortunate because it's thanks to the hard work of lots of people on this call, but we've been certainly lucky and grateful to have all of your leadership because you've stopped open carry from passing legislatively. I say this is a unique scenario not only because the Attorney General is deciding not to defend it, but also because the first Court of Appeals, the first DCA, is in many ways a regional court that should only really be impacting that geographic area, which is not the entire state of Florida. However, the prevailing interpretation here is that open carry is now the law in Florida. You've seen that response from Sheriff Mina here in Orange County. So Linda has done her due diligence of sending me a series of questions, which I think I'm gonna try to answer those questions here and hopefully be able to clarify what this means. First, the question is, how did this happen without the legislature? I mean, really, it's just a simple separation of powers. You know, we have the legislature, we have the executive branch with the governor, and then we have the courts. The courts reviewed the law and they determined that it was unconstitutional. Is there anything that we can do about it? That's a really important question. So I'll put my answer to that in many different categories. Is there anything that we can do about this, or is there anything that we can do to undo the court ruling? Well, legally speaking, I mean, this is difficult because, again, the Attorney General is refusing to defend the law. As it relates to courts and new lawsuits, there is a possibility that a court in another state could potentially uphold an open carry law in that other state, and the federal courts could weigh in on the side of prohibiting open carry, but that is a very long-term prospect. And we do not have I'm not aware of any lawsuit in any other state that would result in that outcome. So legally speaking and litigation speaking, there's not much that we can do. Now, legislatively, what can we do to mitigate the damage? Mitigation, I think, is going to be key here. So any sensitive places that are currently prohibited in law, as you heard from Sheriff Mina say, he talked about how in courthouses and in schools, carrying a firearm is still prohibited. Yes, that is the case, but we'll have to see what, if any, additional sensitive places we could, in good faith, kind of add to the prohibition on open carry under what the Bruin historical tradition test is. So the Bruin case was a federal case recently that the SCOTUS took up. It was not great as far as the outcome. And basically what they decided is, oh, well, we're going to respect the tradition in the United States of possessing and carrying firearms, and anywhere that we decide that traditionally it has been okay to do this, and any way that you can carry a gun that we decide traditionally and historically is okay since 1791 actually, then we're going to allow that to move forward. What does that mean for us? Well, it means that in a law, if the court says historically, yes, in the United States, you've been prohibited from bringing a gun into a courthouse, then that will remain. The problem that we have in Florida is the way the law is currently written on these prohibited spaces, places that you can't bring guns. And the way that it is written is it specifically says that the open carry of handguns and the concealed carry of firearms is prohibited in a police, sheriff, or highway patrol station, in a detention facility, a prison, a courthouse, a courtroom, a meeting of a governing body of a county, a public school district, a municipality, any meeting of the legislature or committee thereof. There's a whole bunch that are listed here in Florida Statute 790.06 12A. But the caveat here, and I want to cut straight to the point, is it only mentions an open carry of handguns being prohibited. It does not specify that the open carry of long guns is prohibited. So that we have an opportunity here to clarify legislatively this upcoming session, although it will be a tall order given the makeup of the Florida legislature, I believe, in my opinion, to prohibit the open carry of long guns in these places that have long been considered sensitive spaces and prohibited areas where you cannot open carry. I've seen questions about how can we undo this? Well, culturally, I just want to point out that we do have lots of folks who are pro Second Amendment, as we are, and who own guns, who support banning open carry. We know that law enforcement, particularly the Florida Sheriff's Association, has long opposed the repeal of open carry. So we have friends potentially on our side that may perhaps lend their voice and their advocacy to trying to clarify what is now a legally gray area. But of course, that is going to be a tough fight in the Florida legislature. Before I ramble on and answer more questions, does anyone have any questions about some of what I've said, or maybe even wants to push back on my interpretation of some of what I have described?
Spencer, did you have anything to add to that from other states that have dealt with it? Or anything that you've dealt with open carry in your legal stance?
I think that a lot of what Senator Smith said is exactly what I would say and how I would describe things. Certainly nothing where I would push back. I think in terms of the litigation picture, it is true that anything on the litigation front that might reverse or undo this is a sort of medium to long-term prospect, especially if we start looking into decisions in other states and trying to get something at the federal level. There are some other litigation related options in Florida, limited to Florida, that would involve intervention, essentially someone stepping in and taking up this lawsuit because the attorney general won't. But that process too is somewhat fraught and uncertain, would take a significant amount of time, and it's not clear where it would end up at the end of the day. So that's sort of the litigation picture. I think is very much accurate to view that as a kind of long-term consideration. On legislative policy, yes, absolutely. The existing restrictions regarding sensitive places and things like that are still in place. I think it's worth noting that Florida law does prohibit, I forget the specific term, but essentially menacing someone with a firearm or threatening someone with a firearm.
Mhm.
That is something that I think may become a more significant issue in light of firearms being openly carried, and it's going to be important for people to know that they have a right to not be threatened, and for people and law enforcement to know how to exercise their rights in that respect and enforce the law. Because of course there's sort of a more obvious point at which someone who is concealed carrying threatens someone, and that's arguably more ambiguous when it comes to a firearm that's being openly carried. So I think that it's going to be quite important just in terms of public awareness to make sure that folks are aware of their rights on that front. And in addition to that, I think the most significant aspect of current law that's really going to need to be communicated to folks is that related to private property and folks' ability to prohibit guns on their own private property, um, to tell any armed individuals that come onto their property that they have to leave, and that there are serious penalties for refusing to do so if you are armed and go onto private property where firearms are not permitted.
Thank you for that. But somebody comes on private property with a firearm and you say, get away, I'm a little scared of what happens next.
That's a very, very valid concern. I think
Yes.
encouraging folks to post signage is probably a good way to try and mitigate that issue and make sure that you're sort of proactively communicating that rather than having to engage in that confrontation as often.
Absolutely. There was a question in the chat about the do you think if someone brings a long gun to the legislative meeting? Well, yesterday, I don't know if y'all saw that, but
Yeah.
they had armed guards in the Capitol outside of the committee meeting. So that to me is saying that they're frightened. Kathy, what do you have your hand up?
Yeah, Senator Smith, I was kind of wondering, I would imagine that clarifying legislation not in the direction we would like would be very possible in the House. But Senator Albritton has been, somewhat of a barrier to things moving on to the Senate. Do you think he'll still be able to hold back should some egregious thing get passed in the House?
I hope so. And I will also concur with your assessment. The reason open carry got no hearing in the Florida Senate is because of President Albritton. Talking about what happened yesterday in the Florida House. So basically yesterday, only the Florida House is meeting now. The Florida Senate is not in committee. The Florida House has created a special committee on property taxes that concluded 2 days of meetings yesterday. We saw outside of that committee hearing, which of course took place in the Florida House, I believe is in the Florida House. Perhaps they maybe went into other parts of the Capitol complex. But a reporter, Forrest Saunders, says, posted a photo of the sergeant's office holding long guns visibly and openly outside of the committee hearing. And he says Capitol Police are carrying long guns outside of a House committee meeting today. The sergeant's office tells me it's a precaution following the recent change to Florida law now permitting the open carrying of firearms. Now, I'm trying to confirm on the Senate side what the Senate policy is and what the policy for the Florida legislature will be. Here's what I've been able to find out so far. And my question that I pose that has not been directly answered is whether the Florida legislature is interpreting the new open carry law after the first DCA ruling as allowing long guns to be openly carried in the Florida legislature. So far, I am being told by other senators that the new policy in the Capitol will be that Capitol Police and or the sergeant's office will be visibly openly carrying long guns, but that their policy will not include allowing residents to openly carry long guns inside a legislative committee, nor will they be allowed to openly carry long guns inside the gallery of the Florida House and Senate, where members of the public observe the chamber proceedings. However, because open carry is now the law, I am understanding that in the state capitol, residents will be able to openly carry in other parts of the capitol that are not legislative meetings and that are not the fifth floor, which is the public gallery where they can see the Senate and House chamber. That is what I am being told now. And it is very early on. That can change. Um, I do have some bit of confidence here, and am um, at least it makes me feel a little better that they are saying that they will not allow for residents to carry long guns visibly in a legislative chamber or in the Senate chamber, in the gallery, or the House chamber. However, that may change, and I want you to kind of stay tuned, because I know a lot of you come to the Capitol. So you're gonna want to know, okay, wait, so can they openly carry firearms in other spaces in the Capitol? The answer appears to be yes. Now, what were they able to previously do? Previously, members of the public, excuse me, were able to conceal carry in the Florida Capitol, just not in a legislative committee and not on the fifth floor gallery observing the Florida House and Senate. And in fact, there were metal detectors before they entered the fifth floor to guarantee that. So to answer some more questions, though, because I know that there's um, needing to understand in what places can people openly carry now beyond the state capitol. Like, for example, I've heard, what about rallies, public rallies and parades? Well, as an open carry state, yes, individuals would be able to openly carry any kind of firearm at a public rally or at a public parade, for example. In private spaces, as we've just been discussing, let's talk about a business. Can a business have a sign that says no guns? And can they just say if someone comes in with one showing that they need to leave? Yes and yes. Private businesses, small businesses, large businesses, they have the right still under an open carry law to refuse entry to someone who's openly or privately carrying. Of course, if they're privately carrying, they might not know, but they can refuse entry. So the decision, there's going to be pros and cons to that decision. And I saw someone sharing that it was a discussion in the HOA about whether to let people carry firearms openly into the clubhouse or any other spaces. I would presume, I'm not an attorney, although I do play one on the Florida channel, as I mentioned to Linda earlier. I would presume that yes, an HOA can have a policy or continue to have a policy if that was pre-existing to prohibit firearms in a clubhouse because that's private property. So that would be allowed. But then the pros and cons that business owners or private spaces are weighing is, do they leave a sign, or, do they not put up a sign and just decide to enforce that how they want to? If you put up a sign, then it is going to be up to the gun owners or gun carriers on whether to respect that sign or not. Also, if you put a sign, potentially, I don't want to scare anyone out of doing that if they're a small business owner, but it may make them a target for boycott or harassment, if they have a no guns policy. Although I've not seen a lot of that with private businesses. I could be wrong. Maybe folks can share that they've seen that in other retail establishments, for example, that folks are being bullied or harassed or boycotted because they won't allow guns on the property. Um, Questions about colleges and universities. Can they say no guns on their campuses? Okay, so this is a more nuanced question because we know that we have a campus carry restriction in Florida that we want to uphold, that we famously defeated in a Florida Senate committee earlier this year. I was one of the no votes against that campus carry bill. If we see another campus carry bill this session, I suppose it would depend on the language. If a campus carry bill hypothetically did pass through the Florida legislature, the language could be limited to just public universities and colleges, but if it creates a right for individuals to carry on college campuses, then that would likely bind public universities and private institutions as well, and require them to allow guns on college campuses, whether they be public or private. Former Senator Fine's campus carry bill from last year was very poorly drafted. And it didn't really say exactly what it did or what it was intended to do. Technically, it prohibited even storing a gun on campus, requiring every person to carry it with them at all times, which also didn't really make a lot of sense. But I don't know if we will see that proposal again next session. I would expect that we probably will, even if Senator Fine is no longer in the Florida Senate.
Rose, there's a really good question from Michael Allen. What types and level of communication will be made available to the public about this new law and the areas of restriction where guns can be carried? I have a concern about the Black and brown people who may choose to carry a weapon, open or concealed, when confronted by the police or other citizens carrying a weapon.
So yeah, no, this is it's a really good question because we're still kind of seeing like how are entities interpreting this. I think that the guidance that we received from Sheriff Mina was very good guidance. You know, we can certainly say now that the prohibition on on carrying at all in any of these sensitive spaces is certainly going to continue, even in an open carry state, with the exception of them potentially being able to bring long guns into some of these prohibited places. I don't know if maybe someone else wants to jump in to try to answer this question.
It's a really good question, especially because there's so much racial profiling that's legal now with the police because of immigration. And yeah, that's a good question.
It's why training and communication from our local law enforcement agencies is so important, because we have 67 county sheriffs.
Yeah.
And we have many more city police chiefs for the various cities around the state of Florida. Right now, they're all being told by our attorney general that open carry is the law, and that also applies to people of color. So people need to know their rights to avoid harassment, certainly, but also need to look to some of our locally elected sheriffs to see what guidance they're putting out.
If I may,
Hmm?
if I may, again, hello everyone. My name is Michael Allen. I actually have a gun violence prevention program under two names, if you will. Surrender Your Hate is the name of my for-profit company, and Let Life Live is the name of my nonprofit. I am actually on a call tonight with my fraternity brothers, Phi Beta Sigma. I'm a graduate of Florida A&M and as an HBCU. And I'm a local resident here. I'm from Leesburg, Florida originally. Been back in Orlando now for about the past 5 years, where I've started this and partnered with Linda and other organizations. The reason for the question and the reason for the background is I'm concerned, about really everyone, but Black and brown people especially, walking in the streets without knowing some of the places, and then everyone from law enforcement to the private citizen who chooses to be a bit more assertive because they have a gun. Guns seem to make people more bold. I'm a gun owner. I have a concealed carry weapons permit, but I'm not looking to, confront someone. And if someone confronts me, especially if it's a police officer, I am trained and I know how to, minimize the damage through conflict resolution, de-escalation. But the average person on the street, especially a child who may not should have the weapon in the first place, which is another issue, when they come across, a citizen or a police official, communication needs to be in the schools. Communication needs to be, on the news, on social media, to help mitigate these possibilities. The term that Spencer used, and I'm forgetting the term right now, how it can be interpreted, if you will, of what's going on, can be very dangerous, because everybody has a different interpretation. So I think we need a real campaign on communication as broadly as possible, from schools to community centers, churches, etc., and helping people learn how to minimize their risk when they are confronted, whether they have a gun or not. Thank you.
Agreed, Michael. And I just shared in the chat the link to the Florida DAX, the website, the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, where basically they list what the full list of sensitive places is in Florida law where the concealed carry of firearms or the open carry of handguns is prohibited.
Judy, do you have any input at this point? I think you're on a different
I'm here.
page.
Sorry.
Okay.
I don't. Thank you for asking, but I would defer to Mr. Myers. He probably has a lot more information than I do.
Is this something that what Michael was talking about that we can include at our tabling events? When we give out gun locks, that we can also include, would have to get it from someone. Kathy, maybe we can work on who to get that from, but to give out this information at tabling events, does that make any sense? Maybe work with the Sheriff's Association.
Yeah, I think working with the sheriffs is pretty essential on this, and them communicating about this is incredibly important. But there's no reason to not also include it at something like a tabling event. The nature of this statute, it's very well suited to just sort of being on a one-page flyer that you could hand off with something like a gun lock, and maybe clean up the language a little bit so it just very straightforwardly lays out where you cannot be carrying a firearm under state law. I think
Okay.
the only thing that is important to flag on top of this is the interaction with private property, because these sensitive locations are located in a different section of statute than the language on private property restrictions. So I think it's important to add the caveat that in addition to these places where you generally cannot be carrying a firearm, you also need to respect others' private property rights. And if you see a sign that says no firearms, that means you can't carry your gun there. If someone tells you that firearms aren't allowed on their property and asks you to leave, you have to leave. And those are probably the two caveats that are important to add to something like that.
That was a question that I had. Do we have to have a sign out, or can we just say it's not allowed on my property?
Yeah, the sign is a really important deterrent, and I think important and effective, but it is not on its own legally sufficient. the way the Florida statute is phrased, someone is not breaking the law until they bring the gun onto the property, they're asked to leave, and they refuse. So
Okay.
even if they see the sign, if they enter a building with a gun, they haven't broken the law yet. They need to be asked to leave.
Oh, okay.
So the goal with signage is to act as a deterrent so that that confrontation doesn't need to take place and they won't enter in the first place. But it is not on its own sufficient to enforce the law. And maybe that's something to explore legislatively, but that's the state of the law right now.
Okay. Carlos, do you know if hospitals are included? That was one of the questions earlier. If hospitals are included in those safe places?
Yeah, so hospitals are not explicitly listed on the list of prohibited places in Florida law. However, many of our hospital chains are private hospitals that have their own policies. So I'll use Advent Health as an example because I know Advent Health is in many communities across the state, including here in Central Florida. That's a private hospital. So, I mean, they serve the public, but they're a private hospital in the sense that they can establish their own rules. So that I I think I don't know what their policy is on even concealed carrying firearms into the hospital. Now, a safety net hospital, or one that would be considered like a public hospital, that would be like Orlando Health, ORMC. So that appears to be, I would say, potentially a gray area. Perhaps they might have to allow open carry in those hospitals. I'm going to
Oh,
try to get some answers on that. I'm talking to a policy analyst right now about the hospital question, and even she thinks that the public hospitals may need to allow open carry.
wow. Because they already have the um, metal detectors, whereas Advent Health does not, at least the ones I've been in. So that's interesting. Okay. And any other questions, y'all? I mean, Carlos, excuse me, Senator Smith, you've done an incredible job answering questions. And I think most of us feel like we're going to need to read a book, go out in the nature, eat our chocolate, eat our popcorn, because there's a lot of heavy stuff here that we really need to figure out. But it's a huge team here, and we can do some things to try to make things a little bit better. Let's see, Elizabeth, you have a question.
Not so much a question. Again, thank you for having me here. And I do have to preface this because I am with the VA, that the VA does not have a stance one way or the other about the legislator, but we are here to make sure that we offer support for all of you to make sure that our veterans are aware of secure storage and suicide prevention. And that being said, one of the things that we have seen that's been effective is education. And we have hosted workshops for our veterans where we bring in somebody from the NRA or a sheriff department to educate our veterans on all the concealed carry legislation. We will be having somebody next month to educate on the open carry. And then we preface that with a resource fair about mental health and secure storage. So even though we are educating them about what their rights and responsibilities are, because a lot of them, if they have a concealed carry, because they're a veteran, they don't have to take a class, so they may not know the updated laws. We give them the opportunity to educate themselves about the newest laws and legislation, but then we also provide them with resources on how to keep themselves safe if they are going to have a firearm. And that has been working really well. And it has also allowed some of our veterans to feel safe that if they seek mental health treatment, their firearms aren't going to be taken away. So we've actually seen an increase in use of mental health because of this. So it's been, I just wanted to let everybody know that if you're looking to do something, that has been a really good way for us to pair the two without seeming like we're wanting to take away firearms, but also keeping them safe at the same time.
That's very helpful, Elizabeth. I'll meet with you sometime and see some of the material that you have, and then we'll see how we can incorporate some of that. That would be great. That would be great. And then Samantha put in the chat that that Gifford's is going to have a more extended Gifford's webinar on open carry on Friday, October 24th at noon. And she gives her email there. Thank you very much, Samantha. That's very helpful because it's going to take a lot of these to try to get our heads wrapped around things for sure. For sure. Are there any other questions?
I was just going to say, I've been in Texas for the last 5 months with my daughter, and she lives in Fort Worth, which I think Fort Worth, Dallas area is a more blue area, but almost every restaurant there, every business, every grocery store has signs, no weapons allowed. And so I'm hoping that same thing will happen here, because my take on it is, if I walk into Publix and someone's walking around with a gun, I'm leaving my grocery cart in the middle of the aisle. I don't care what's in it, and I'm walking out the door, because I'm not going to grocery shop with guns. And the other thing I was going to say, I was at the Seminole County School Board meeting right after this this legal opinion came down, and we had 8 police officers, some inside, some outside, and a metal detector. We had never had that before. I mean, we had probably 2 police, the head of the school resources officers, of course, is always there, and usually 1 other police officer, but nothing like that. And so now that Senator Smith said the thing about the open carry potentially of long guns is maybe allowed into the the school board meetings, that's terrifying, because I don't know if you've been to a school board meeting lately, but they can get pretty nasty. Anyway, I think that was those were my concerns. Anyway.
Thank you, Fiona. Yeah. The other question was Jill's with how stand your ground fits in here. I don't remember how you had it written, but you were asking about.
Well, it seems like stand your ground gets to be used as I felt threatened, even if there is no discernible act of threat by the other person. I feel threatened by someone carrying a gun. And so if somebody's carrying a gun and I'm carrying a gun, I feel threatened. I mean, it just isn't that a recipe for potential increased shootings? I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
I think that's completely right, and that this doesn't change anything about Florida's stand your ground law, but is going to increase the number of situations where it may come into play. And I think the 2 that are most apparent to me are that one you just described, where there are 2 individuals that are both carrying, and at least one of them is carrying openly, and it creates some sort of perception of a threat. Or circumstances where someone has carried into a private business and the business owner has to confront that person to ask them to leave. Is the person carrying going to feel threatened or say that they felt threatened because a business owner came to them and confronted them and said, hey, you need to get out of here? And I think in both of those circumstances, there's a lot more risk of violence now than there was previously. You're just creating more opportunities for confrontation. And I think that it's going to make the negative effects of the stand your ground law more apparent, even though it hasn't actually changed the law itself.
Yeah, that was the underpinning of my question. That if I'm walking on the street and somebody else is walking on the street, whether you employ the stand your ground principal or not, if you have hot-headed people with a weapon who interpret that my movement or my very presence is a threat, then I think we're about to see some Wild Wild West stuff happening in Florida, and I hope that changes quickly. You know, communication will help, but if you don't touch the heart, and offer some consequences to behavior, this is a powder keg. This really is. Sorry to be gloomy, but that's I'm concerned. I really am. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we all feel that way, Michael. And I want to say it's 1 o'clock now. So I do want to say, I know Senator Smith and Judi probably have to go, and Spencer, and I want to say thank you so very much, and Samantha, for coming on and giving us some insight on what we need to do. And so we'll talk about, if anybody that can stay on, we'll spend a few minutes talking about what can we do and what's the next steps. But everybody give Senator Smith a huge hug and round of applause, because I don't know what we would do without you. I really don't. I really say that from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. And
Thank you,
Jarek
Linda.
too. We love Jarek too.
I know Jarek appreciates that. No, thank you all, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat about this. I'm sorry that we don't have necessarily clear and definitive answers for every question, because this is all still very new, but I'm gonna work to try to get some clearer perspective on what the state capital's policy will be. Certainly, I feel like there's still some question around the hospital issue, because there is a Florida statute that does prohibit bringing firearms into hospitals that provide mental health services as well. So need some clarity on that. And there's just a lot here that we're all still learning. So thank you for caring about this and being a part of the discussion today. I hope you found it helpful.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. And Judi, thank you. We know that you're always there if we need quick answers. And thank you again, Spencer and Samantha, for jumping on today and for providing another meeting that we can attend as we've kind of thought about this a little bit longer. So thank you all. And those that want to stay on a little bit longer, we'll do a little bit of what's next. Thank you. All right. It's gonna be. All right, on the what's next, first of all, we do have legislative delegation meetings coming up. And I have those dates down. October 21st is Orange County. So that one's at 9 o'clock at the County Commission's office. Then October 23rd is Seminole County, also 9 o'clock. And October 27th is Osceola County. And they will only take one person from each organization, but you can speak for yourself. So I'm speaking for myself. There's a lot of issues right now, so you only usually have 3 minutes. The most effective way to speak, as I think all of you know, is to go and speak to the representatives and the senators face to face with your own meeting. But it is really helpful to do the delegation meetings and give them your 3-minute speech, just to get it in there again. And then when you get to committee meetings and to Tallahassee, the same thing. You just do it very quickly. So that if you want to speak, let me know. You do need to sign up ASAP if you want to speak, because they do it in order of, especially in Orange County and I think Osceola, they do it in order of when you request to be a speaker. Seminole County, they group it in different groups, but you don't want to be the last one, because they're usually tired and they're not hearing you anyway. So
and they cut off for lunch. They have to leave for lunch.
Bring it in for a landing. Bring it in for a landing. Committee hearings start well, there's going on right now. And then the week of October 13th through the 17th, and October 6th through the 10th. I got that backwards. October 6th through the 10th, and then the 13th through the 17th. So we'll kind of keep an eye on what's going on if we need to go up there, because that's where the power begins. We have found that if you don't have your bill read in the first 3 weeks, then it's probably not going to happen. So we really push the meetings before, the committee meetings, and then the first 3 weeks of session to try to get bills heard that we want to be heard, or to block those that we don't want to happen. I think we do need to get together. I'll get together with Kathy and get some points as to what we just learned, particularly for the long guns in the safe areas. That is so scary. Just seeing that person, because I saw the picture of and he's a security person with that long gun in the Capitol, was really freaky. But we do need to work on that. So if you have thoughts on that, we will have some meetings on that. If you want to be a part of that, just email me, text me, and we'll include you. Campus carry, we've really got to push against campus carry, because they don't have a whole lot left to bring forward, but we're pretty sure campus carry is going to be one of those things. It was interesting, and I don't know how, the attorney and Senator Smith both told us that, an individual could do a lawsuit against, and that's kind of how this happened. It was one person did a lawsuit knowing he was going into an area where long guns were not allowed. He knew he was going to get arrested. And so one person got this happen. So I still wonder if one person can erase it. I don't know. We'll think more on that. Any comments, any questions? I know it's heavy.
I have a comment.
Yes, Karen.
I'll try to get through this. This is really, not to use a pun, triggering for me, because it's something that happened in my past that was pretty scary, gun related. And I think it was Jill who said if she's in Publix and she sees a gun, she's out of there. I feel like
Fiona.
What?
It's Fiona.
It's Fiona.
It's me.
But I would do that. I would do the same thing.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, and this whole
No,
state
you are not. You are not.
I just don't want to be around. I mean, if it's concealed carry, at least I don't know that you have a gun, but how am I going to know whether you're walking into Publix, if you're walking into Publix with a long gun, whether you're doing that to shoot up the store, or you're just walking into there to get your sub? I mean, I feel like I'm losing my mind. I'm sorry. That's all I'm gonna say.
I feel
I'm with
that
you. I'm with you as a gun owner, as a concealed carry person. You don't know what's in a person's mind or what's in their heart. So this is very dangerous territory. And not only do we have to pray, but we got to also litigate and we got to vote.
And Michael, I always remember Philando Castillo. He did everything right. He had a concealed carry permit. He told the police that he had a gun. He told them he had a permit, and they still shot him dead.
Multiple
so
times.
Right. That is the problem. And I feel that's the same problem. The same problem in Dallas when there was the shooter and there was all these people with open carry, and the police didn't know who the bad guy was. But you can tell, I've told that story a million times to people who think guns should be everywhere, and they just don't listen. So my only pushback on it is, like I said, I'll leave all my frozen goods in the middle of Publix, and I don't care.
Me too, Fiona.
Absolutely. That's got to be a part of our individual de-escalation, self-preservation, action, because again, I could be mistaken for somebody, and whether it be a private citizen or a police officer, and they see a bulge in my back pocket or wherever, and they just open fire.
I mean, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to be, there's a lot's going to happen that will be, I'm not to be negative, but.
Well, thank you for, talking about it, Karen, and your history, because we need to just support one another and lift each other up, because it is scary time, but especially if you've experienced before.
Yes.
So we feel
Yeah,
for you and care.
yeah.
And we're here for you or anyone that experiences it, for sure.
I think a lot of the problem is in the political climate we are in right now. There is so much disinformation and people that don't know. They don't know what the laws is. They don't know that, I mean, perhaps we're better off people not knowing you can open carry now. But I mean, I think that's so much of the problem is people aren't educated. So how does somebody react if they see somebody open carrying and they don't know that's now the law? There's so many things that can go wrong that just I don't know.
Well, we're really lucky to have Cheyenne from Progress Florida to help. I mean, we're working together with her on legislation and things like this, and what we can do, like the education and doing it at tabling events. We'll see what Elizabeth had. We'll see what we can come up with between League of Women Voters and Progress Florida. And am I putting you in a spot, Cheyenne? Are you in agreement? I think that we really, to give us the power that we can do something. Let's see, Beth is saying, I'm so worried about the impact on all, but especially our Black and brown communities. Absolutely. We should ask places like Publix to take a stand. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Beth.
That's exactly what I was going to say, was that we need to advocate at the corporate level. And go to that's maybe where I don't know if that's something that Progress Florida can be a part of, but activate groups that say, what is your policy? What is going to be your policy? And have, it could target just say Publix, just pick one entity and create a campaign where you get a whole bunch of people that say, if I see a person with a long gun in your store, I'm leaving immediately, and nothing, I'm not, whatever, but to have a thought out campaign that targets vulnerable places that are not specifically identified in the law itself, and then go, corporate. Publix is a prime example. It's a Florida-based corporation.
That makes a lot of sense. And Beth said they did it in Texas like that. So we can kind of see what they did and copy what is good for us. Okay. And any other questions? I know I'm emotionally exhausted. I'm sure y'all are emotionally exhausted. So it's time for that chocolate and popcorn and book. But I really appreciate everybody getting on today, and it's a good group. We're going to make some difference. So just keep breathing that in. Okay. Anything else? Cheyenne, do you have anything else to add?
I don't think so. I can just expand that Progress Florida, along with our sister organization, Florida Watch, we're part of what's called the Florida Comms and Research Hub. So we exist pretty much in the background, but to help advocacy organizations with research tested messaging. And like I put in the chat, this issue is, we're on the side of public opinion with this issue. However, a lot of advocacy organizations have hesitated to speak out since open carry because of the anxiety that some folks mentioned in this call of, is this going to encourage more people to actually open carry? And as Michael's pointing out, but would we rather them be informed about the way that they're doing it? And so this is just really helpful to guide the conversation that can come from these organizations, and however we can help in terms of building, action forms, helping just with the legislative process. They make it confusing on purpose. Any ways that I can help sort that out, please let me know. I spend too long in Florida statute. Happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for running the meeting today. I appreciate you. Okay. Anything else before we close out?
One other thing I was going to say was that, back to the whole tourism thing too. I grew up in New Zealand where the police don't even carry guns. So the first time I saw a gun was on a police officer in the airport going through Tahiti to the US. And I hate them. And I know if you're brought up in a country where like England or Australia, New Zealand, where the police don't carry guns, you have a totally different view of guns than what a lot of Americans do. So I think it's going to hurt Florida. It's going to hurt Florida in the pocketbook too. And sometimes that's the only thing politicians listen to, or businesses.
And God forbid one of these legislators or their family members or their friends, something happens to them after the implementation of this open carry, wild west, guns everywhere approach, and the financial piece will change and will change this, and then the loss of their own loved ones. We'll put it back on the table.
Yes, and Karen was asking, yes, Disney does have metal detectors. The parks do have metal detectors.
Wow, I did not realize that, because the last time I went, they didn't, but it makes sense. But
I know.
And Cheyenne said legislators consistently oppose having guns in committee meetings. Yeah, but Fiona and I went in committee meetings. It wasn't on the 5th floor, but they took away, we saw people coming in that we knew had guns, and they got into the Capitol, but when it went into the committee meeting, nobody checked them, but they took our drinks away.
Oh,
and I'm like, hello.
Hello. Throw that at somebody.
So I'm glad
I know,
to know they check them
for some
again.
reason I was the bad guy. They kept coming up to me and telling me off, and I'm like, I'm just sitting here. But they're all the guys in their cowboy boots and their wanting guns everywhere. They left them alone.
Welcome to Florida.
Fiona, I'm with you. I was raised in the U.S., but I wasn't raised in gun culture. We didn't have guns. I didn't know anybody except for hunting. Sometimes people had some shotguns, or my dad had a BB gun that he once shot a quail with. But this was in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But I wasn't raised around guns, and I'm not used to seeing them, and they're scary to me. And I don't know how. And as I said, I have a really serious thing that happened to me. When I was 18, I was held at gunpoint for a long time with a gun pointed at my head. And if I see a gun out in the public, especially a long gun like that, I don't know how I'm going to react. I mean, I feel so triggered right now. And
I know.
what are you going to do? There's nothing I can do. That's what frustrates me. I mean, we can go to the legislature and so forth, but I feel like too many people are against us. But Cheyenne, you said that's not true, so I hope you're right.
I think Cheyenne was correct in her statement in the chat, is that most Floridians do not want this. So that's a good thing for us. And then that'll help us when we go to places like Publix.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. And let's keep this conversation going. We're gonna do something.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Bye now.
Thanks. Bye.